Hello, and welcome to Scandinavia House and tonight's book talk and film screening with Nancy Marie Brown and Sara Dosa. Nancy will be presenting her new book, Looking for the Hidden Folk, and Sara will be presenting her film, The Seer and the Unseen. Looking for the Hidden Folk is out now by Pegasus Books and can be purchased outside in the lobby or at your local independent bookstore. I would also like to thank Julia Romero from Pegasus for helping make this event possible. Scandinavia House hosts programs throughout the year, both in person and virtually, and tonight, hybrid. They include exhibitions, concerts, film screenings, lectures, and literary events, and children's program. So please do visit scandinavias.org for everything that we have on to offer. Nancy Marie Brown is the author of several highly praised cultural histories, including The Real Valkyrie, The Songs of the Viking, and Ivory Vikings. All have been presented by Scandinavia House. These titles have been favorably reviewed in The New Yorker, The New York Times, The Economist, and the Times Literary Supplement, as well as the Wall Street Journal. Nancy has spent decades studying Icelandic literature and culture. She lives in a farm in Vermont where she keeps 4 Icelandic horses and an Icelandic sheepdog. Sara Dosa is an Indie Spirit Award nominated documentarian and a Peabody Award producer whose films explore the human relationship to non-human nature, often through tropes, allegories, myths, and magical realism. Her works have been shown at festivals worldwide, such as Sundance, South by Southwest, New Directors, New Films, at MoMA and Lincoln Center, Copenhagen Docs, and Vision Surreal. And has been screened in partnerships with museums such as MoMA, BM, Banff, the Louvre, among others. Most recently, she has directed Fire of Love, an archival collage film about volcanologist Katie and Maurice Kraft, and other directing titles include the Indie Spirit nominated The Last Season, a verite portrait of 2 Oregon veterans turned wild mushroom hunters, and The Seer and Unseen, which we'll see tonight. In 2018, she was named as the inaugural class of Doc NYC's 40 Under 40 and has been inducted in the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences. So at this stage, we're going to start with Nancy. She's going to present her book, and then we'll bring Sara onto the screen, and they'll have a conversation, and then we'll present Sara's film. So please stick around after the film screening of The Seer and Unseen, where Sara will come back and you can ask questions to her personally. So I hope everyone enjoys the evening, and now please welcome Nancy Marie Brown.
Thank you very much. So, this book, as one of my early readers pointed out, is a love song to Iceland. The first time I went there in 1986, I felt I had found a piece of myself that, if not actually lost, had been long suppressed. I originally conceived of this book as a collection of travel essays based on the journals of my many trips. I had drafted some of the chapters way back in 2009. Then in the summer of 2016, on my 21st trip to Iceland, I took a walk with an elf seer, Ragnhildur Jónsdóttir. That winter, my collection of travel essays was hijacked by the elves. Ragnhildur and I took a walk in a lava field that she and her elf friends had protected from destruction when a new road was built nearby. We didn't talk much about the elves or the hidden folk as we walked. Instead, we photographed lava crags and stacks and pillars, pillows of silver-green moss, caves and clefts and individual lichen-splashed rocks. We listened to the wind sighing in the knee-high willows and the incessant cries of seabirds. Black-backed gulls barking, now, now, now. And Arctic terns, many terns, with their piercing kriya cries. It was by turns warm and sunny and cloudy and cool, a fine summer's day. The breeze was light, just enough to keep the gnats at bay. The land smelled of peat with hints of salt and sea. We wandered about, pointing out plants. I didn't keep a list, but 2 hours later, back at my hotel when I wrote up my recollections, I remembered blueberry, crowberry, stone bramble, violet, dandelion, mountain avens, buttercup, butterwort, wood geranium, wild thyme, willow shrubs with pale, fluffy catkins, and several kinds of grass, including sheep sorrel, which we tasted. It was sour as limes. Elves' cup moss was the only sign of elves that I saw. We talked about art and inspiration. What is inspiration? Why do some places attract artists and spark creative thought? Why are some places beautiful? And how do you define beauty? And we shared an experience I still can't explain. Said Rockhilder, as we left the lava field, "Now, do you believe in elves?" Looking for the hidden folk is my attempt to answer that question, a question that seemed to get harder to understand the more I tried. For years, I found myself wandering through history, religion, folklore, and art, circling back to explore theology, literary criticism, mythology, and philosophy, stopping along the way to dip my toes into cognitive science, psychology, anthropology, biology, volcanology, cosmology, and quantum mechanics. I used to work as a science writer, you see, so my quest took some unusual turns. Each discipline, I found, defines and redefines what is real and what is unreal, what is natural and what is supernatural, what is demonstrated and what is theoretical, what is alive and what is inert. Believing in elves, I learned, is a lot like believing in quantum mechanics. It is a way of perceiving and valuing the world around us. All of the travel essays I had been working on, I realized, shared one theme. Icelanders see nature in different ways than I had been taught to see it. In Iceland, where the weather and geology are as fantastic as anything Tolkien thought up, the imagination is set free and the mind is urged to pay attention. In Iceland, I felt more alive, more open to wonder and beauty, because to the Icelanders I met, the world around us, every rock and every hill, is inhabited by elves, yes, but also by stories. Stories shape how you see the world. They determine not only how you think of elves, but also how you think of such real things as hills and mountains and volcanoes. The stories we tell protect a place or permit its destruction. That's why it seems to me we make a critical mistake when we laugh off an Icelander's belief in elves. We assume we agree on what each of us means by belief and elf. Think about it this way. If Icelanders are crazy to talk to elves, are Christians likewise crazy to talk to God? What immaterial beings are we allowed to believe in, and who is allowed to do the believing? In 1974, an Icelandic psychologist conducted a survey on spiritual matters. Of those who responded, 5% had seen an elf, while 33%, quote, entertained the possibility of their existence. In 2006, the University of Iceland conducted a similar survey. Again, 5% said they had seen an elf. This time, more than 50% entertained the possibility of their existence. Let's put those numbers into context. According to recent surveys, 10% of Americans say they've seen a UFO, and 48% of Americans are, quote, open to the idea that alien spacecraft are observing our planet. Look at it another way. 81% of Americans say they believe in God, and 64% are, quote, convinced that God exists. So is an elf more like a UFO, or is an elf more like God? For folklorist Terry Gunnell, who organized the 2006 Elf Survey, the most striking result is that in spite of the radical changes in Icelandic society since 1974, the Icelanders' traditional beliefs about elves had remained the same. They were, he concluded, deeply rooted. The idea that some people can see elves and others cannot does have a long history in Iceland. When Ragnhildur Jónsdóttir wrote to the mayor on behalf of the elves living in the lava field in 2013, she called herself sjáandi, a seer. She did not have to define the term. As the Lutheran bishop of Iceland wrote in 1570, elves are invisible to us unless they wish to appear, yet the properties of certain men's eyes are such that no spirit can ever escape their sight. What are these properties? No one knows. Then again, seeing itself remains somewhat of a mystery. According to neuroscientist Chris Frith, the brain creates the world from the very limited and imperfect signals provided by our senses, from our experiences and our expectations, from what we've been taught and what we've read. The brain creates a prediction of what ought to be there out in the world. Eyesight doesn't answer the question, what is this? But instead, what is this like? Says neuroscientist Moshe Bar, our perception of the environment relies on memory as much as it does on incoming information. In 2010, I met this volcano, Eyjafjallajökull. What was it like? Not a cyclops or a titan, as volcanoes were to the ancient Greeks. The classics did not shape my worldview. My volcano was a dragon. Here's how I describe it in the book. The craters sighed and snored like a dragon's nostrils, whoosh, shush, whoosh, shush, whoosh, shush, and snorted red-orange fountains of flame. Stars fell down the sides of the new-made hills. Lava drops bounced and rolled like gold coins. Black ash peppered the snow. At the tips of the dragon's cooling limbs, the lava still moved, bulging and breaking, tinkling like broken glass, but more rhythmic and musical. As the sun set, the colors bloomed. A fat yellow tongue of living rock oozed over one crater's side. Orange eyes twinkled in the dark arms of rock. The lava fountains turned hot pink. I filled my camera's memory card. I filled my mind until my visual sense was stupefied. When I say I saw a dragon, I'm speaking metaphorically. Elf seer Ragnhildur Jónsdóttir is not. But the elf she sees may not look like any elf you might see. Elves have always been shapeshifters. The word is a bottle, the concept a liquid. Throughout history and across cultures, elves can only be seen when they wish to be seen, and they can take on whatever shapes they like. Or perhaps what's true about mountains is also true about elves. We see what we've been trained to see, what our education allows us to see. What image comes to mind when I say elf? Do you see Santa's toy makers, the Keebler elves, the Tooth Fairy, Tinkerbell? The elves Ragnhildur sees, or at least those in the illustrations of her books, look much like people, though they may be dressed in old-fashioned clothes. Some are tall, some are small. Some have pointy ears, some have green skin, but some look like trees. In the earliest stories, in English or Icelandic, elves are like gods and goddesses. Think of Tolkien's Galadriel, as so beautifully acted by Cate Blanchett. In the tale of Thomas the Rhymer, from the 1200s, the elf queen is a beautiful lady on a white horse who kidnaps Thomas and turns him into a sex toy. It was Shakespeare, writing in the 1600s, who shrank this fairy queen to no bigger than an agate stone, the gemstone in the ring on a rich man's finger. Rather than riding a white horse, she comes in a chariot made from half a hazelnut shell and the gauzy bits of grasshoppers' wings. Where once elves were godlike, now they're insect-like. What do you see when I say troll? In the stories I knew, trolls were evil and ugly and stupid. They could be tricked, but they could never be trusted. Then Rockhilder told me the story of a kind troll, a mountain spirit that had saved Rockhilder's neighbor from falling down an icy hillside. That instinct of mine to distinguish evil troll from kindly spirit is a modern fault. We are obsessed with classification. Medieval people were not. Trolls, giants, monsters, elves, any of them might be human enough to have children with. They are all the same species by a modern definition of that term. In the earliest Icelandic texts, troll and elf and dwarf are interchangeable. We really have no idea what these words mean. All are used, writes folklorist Ármann Jakobsson, somewhat like a modern anthropologist might use the term God or deity. All that's clear about Iceland's elves is that they were once worshipped. Elves were declared evil by the Christian church in the early 1200s, around the same time these poems and stories were first written down. Elf seers were denounced as witches, and in the 1400s, burnt at the stake in some countries. In our day, elves are not so much evil as trivial. Our world has been disenchanted. Everything can be understood by science, we think. Everything can be tamed, even if we haven't tamed it or understood it yet. As sociologist Max Weber predicted in the early 20th century, soon there will be no more mysteries, no more magic, no more wonder. Ludwig Wittgenstein found that to be a serious problem. His philosophy, says historian Michael Saylor, awakens us to awe, possibility, difference, and a humble acceptance of the provisional nature of our understanding. Those are things I think about often when I'm in Iceland. Though I've never seen an elf or a troll, I've had several encounters with the supernatural while traveling in Iceland over the last 35 years. Once, while crossing the cold desert at the island's heart on horseback. Here's how I describe that experience in looking for the hidden folk. The name of my horse was Valor. Riding Valor, I had marveled at the free-running herd strung out in front of us, single file, 100 horses silhouetted against the sand, gray, black, chestnut dun, pinto, palomino, roan, bay, their lively legs blurring to wheels as they raced along, a line of moving color against a completely still landscape of barren ground, silver lakes, ageless mountains, the icy dome of Hafsjökull cutting the clouds ahead, the endless gray sky. Nothing changed all day but that pattern painted by the running herd. Nothing moved except ourselves. No sheep, no tractors or jeeps or ATVs went past, all of which had met us on the first day of our ride as the road and the riding track crisscrossed. But we were not alone. This night's lodgings were sparer than the last, fewer rooms, each with more beds. I was tardy unpacking and had to bunk in the dining hall. Lounging there, jotting notes, I felt eyes on my neck. I turned to see Hafsjökull outside the windows, stretching across 3 of them and around the corner like an intelligence looming between earth and sky, gleaming yellow-white, unlike anything real, brilliant, misshapen, awake, a rising moon in wintertime, its edges blurred and shifting. It seemed to breathe. It drew me outside, in spite of sore muscles. I walked dead away from it, across the tussocky field to the gravel banks of the glacial river. The day was warm now that the clouds had lifted. I took off my boots to wade. The water was not icy in the shallows, over black sand. It made me want to strip and bathe, but I was not quite alone. Other riders were about. One man perched on a rock right around the corner. I had never bathed naked in a glacial river before. I had never thought to do anything remotely like that on all my many trips to Iceland. I waited on, looking for a secret spot. Wind sang in my ears. A golden plover called, "Bee-bee, bee-bee." The roar of the river was louder than either wind or bird, but somehow so constant as to mimic silence. A shadow rushed across the sun. I shivered and looked up. Unknowingly, I had turned a circle. The glacier was right in my face. Wings of black cloud rising behind the ice warned me the fine weather wouldn't last, but how long did I have? There was no scale here. I could not guess how far or high that ice cap was. I walked barefoot across the warm black sand braided with turf, soft and spongy and squishy with goose droppings. I decided to ignore their provenance. They felt nice between my toes. I picked up a goose feather. A series of jagged peaks beside the glacier puzzled me. They were covered top to toe with snow, while the mountains in line with them were wholly snowless and blue. Aha! I was seeing only the tips of high snow-capped peaks, their bases hidden beneath the horizon's curve. The glacier was half hidden as well. The black clouds flew closer. I picked up 3 rough, rounded black rocks to remember the river by and let fly my goose feather as a gift in return. I quickened my pace and was startled to see sheep tracks way out here in the wild. The river now ran a greenish gray, milky with silt, its swirling current deadly fast. The sand petered out. I hauled myself up the high grassy bank, startling geese and goslings, and saw nothing at all around me but river, mountains, ice, and sky. No hut, no horses, no signs of human life, as if I'd stepped through a door into another world, a door into other time. That was a feeling I've never forgotten, a feeling that brought home to me how insignificant I really was, and how vast and timeless and beautiful and dangerous the earth could be. In 1992, I attended a lecture at the International Medieval Congress in Kalamazoo, Michigan. In Iceland, scholar Gillian Overing noted, "The center is the margin. Geography is inside out. People settle on the temperate edges of the island while its interior is a glacial desert, cold, inhospitable, and not even crossable most of the year. What kind of self," she mused, "might these places reflect? What kind of self has wilderness at its heart?" That's another question I try to answer in looking for the hidden folk. When I first decided to go to Iceland in 1986, I had dinner with some Icelandic students at Penn State where I worked. I told them I wanted to visit this glacier, Snæfellsjökull. They approved. The Economist said New Agers ranked the glacier the second most holy mountain in the world after a peak in the Himalayas. The mother of the seismologist who was visiting added, "I know what they mean. I have never felt it like I felt it there." She did not define it. Each of my succeeding trips to Iceland has been made or marred by catching sight of the glacier, or failing to. My journals are rich with sightings, or the wish for them. "Went horseback riding for over 4 hours," I wrote. "The glacier kept itself hidden." No glacier, the clouds are too thick and low. No glacier, but some other mountains came and went. No glacier yet. The glacier kept staring at us, beautiful and mysterious, 2 horns on top, like eyes on a skate, the glacier all white. This feeling of being drawn toward a magic mountain is universal. Other writers feel it about Mount Ararat in Turkey or Mount Antakya in Japan. The word one writer uses is not magic, but holy. Another word that applies is wonder. Wonder is an emotion. According to philosopher Jesse Prince, it's wonder that produces both religion and science, as well as art. The three institutions that are most central to our humanity, he says, are united in wonder. They are not in conflict. They are not either or. Each allows us to transcend our animality by transporting us to hidden worlds. It's wonder, he argues, that makes us human. It's wonder that is at the heart of looking for the hidden folk. We all tell stories. We always have. But we don't always take responsibility for the effects of our storytelling. The purpose of a story is not to pass the time. The purpose of a story is to help you lead a good life. In looking for the hidden folk, I invite you to join an intimate conversation about how we look at and find value in nature. I hope to reveal how the words we use and the stories we tell shape the world we see. I argue that our beliefs about the earth will preserve it or destroy it. Scientists name our time the Anthropocene, the human age. Climate change will lead to the mass extinction of species unless we humans change course. Iceland suggests a different way of thinking about the earth, one that to me offers hope. Icelanders believe in elves, and you should too. That's the end of my formal presentation, and now I'm going to invite Sara Dosa to join us and to ask me some questions. There she is. I want to start off with a question for you, Sara. I met Sara at the Icelandic premiere of her film about the elf seer, Ragnhildur Jónsdóttir, The Seer and the Unseen, which we're going to be seeing tonight. I was thrilled to see that she responded to Ragnhildur's elf stories the same way that I did. So I wanted to ask you, Sara, how did you get past the instinct to laugh at the idea that Ragnhildur talks to elves? How were you able to get past your upbringing, which says that anyone who sees elves is childish or loony?
Yeah. Those are great questions. First, I just want to say thank you so much for having me with you all tonight. I'm a tremendous fan of Nancy's work, and I've just been listening to this talk in awe. I'm so moved, and so much of what Nancy is speaking about resonates with my own fascination and wonder of Iceland and what I've known through my travels in Iceland too. So just thank you so much for having me here. To answer your question, Nancy, I think I was powerfully moved by what Ragnhildur says about elves. For me, I grew up in Berkeley, California, a town known for its progressive values. And I had an anthropologist for a mother who very much raised me with this idea that no belief is silly or childish, perhaps, but there is very much a profound logic to all kinds of cultural beliefs, and that you can find beauty, meaning, power, understand power and relationships through seeking to understand various cultural beliefs. So when I first met Raka, as I call her Raka, kind of a nickname for Ragnhildur, when I first met Raka, those were the eyes that I used to see her and to understand her relationship with elves and Huldufolk. And as soon as I met her, I couldn't help but just be seduced to try to see the world the way she did. The fact that she saw life in all things, the fact that she had relationships with boulders that from one perspective seemed inert, but to look with her eyes was an entire community. I found wonderment, as Nancy says, in this system of belief. I found delight and I felt power. The fact that there could be a reciprocal relationship with the earth in this kind of way brought tremendous meaning to me, and also kind of stoked the activist flames within me too, a similar thing to what Nancy has described as well. So I'll just say, I think that meeting Raka, seeing the cultural history behind her belief, where she came from, that I never actually had the instinct to laugh. I was very inspired. And I think one of the things that Raka has powerfully taught me is the importance of listening. And I think approaching her and her worldview from the eyes and ears of a listener is very important, and are things that really helped me to embrace this world that was very new to me and has now critically shaped how I relate to it.
Now you get to ask me a question.
Oh, so many questions. Wow.
I do want to say I was very jealous when I first saw Sarah's film, because I was working on The Hidden Folk at that time, and I knew it would take a couple more years for it to come out. But she was able to do it visually, and all those beautiful scenes of Iceland that I only have words to describe, you actually get to see in her film. So it was like, wow, I mean, could we kind of like join these two projects together somehow? So that's how she's here tonight. So you're going to ask me a hard one.
Hard one. Oh, let's see. I have so many questions. I think one that I've been interested in is I think the idea of geologic time. This is something I've been thinking a lot about in my own work as a filmmaker, is how to communicate kind of vast timescales visually, and especially in a medium that is often confined to 90 minutes. So I'm just curious for you in your work. I don't actually have a fully formed question, but I guess I'm interested in how different timescales have come into specifically this project, knowing that elves, live hundreds of years, and how that kind of geological timescale, or that longevity of time, can perhaps relate to these ideas of the Anthropocene and our relationship with nature.
Well, I don't think I ever actually think in geological timescales, because my understanding of Iceland only goes back to the settlement in about 870. So I'm interested in the human timescale of people interacting with the geology of Iceland. But of course, one of the things that's really exciting about being on Iceland is that it is such a young country. You can actually watch the Earth being born. You can do this in Hawaii too, but I've never been there, and I've been to Iceland many times. But when you're sitting in front of a volcano and the lava is coming out and turning all these strange colors as the sun goes down, and you're hearing the noises that it makes, and just seeing it grow, you start realizing how powerful and how beautiful the Earth is, that it just can make itself. It can generate itself. And then when you're walking through a lava field, you see what you saw as hot pink liquid coming out of the earth and then congealing into what may look like an asphalt parking lot that was being cut up by a bulldozer. A couple years later, the mosses start smoothing that over, and it starts breaking down. And a couple years after that, I mean, not a couple, but maybe 20, 50 years after that, you start seeing the grasses and the trees growing and the birds nesting. And it becomes a whole new world. And you're watching it in your own lifetime. You can watch it change from just, raw rock coming out of the ground, glassy looking almost, to being the homes of all these creatures that you can watch. The foxes build their dens in the lava fields. And one summer my husband and I rented a farmhouse that was right on the edge of a lava field. And this was an abandoned house that no one had lived in since right after the Second World War. They'd lived in a turf house, and then they'd built this house right in the 1940s, and they never quite finished it even before they moved out. So it was essentially a concrete tent. There was no running water. There was not a road to it. We had to cross the tide marsh. And we lived on the edge of the lava field, and we really got to know it. We walked out in the lava every day and saw all the things that lived there and all the different ways in which living animals and plants interact with rock and create something new out of it. And it was really one of those experiences that changes the way you think of the Earth. It is very much alive. And though I didn't actually see the elves and the trolls in the lava field, I felt them. I mean, I definitely felt them when it started getting dark. and you're walking through a lava field and you sort of think you're seeing things moving behind your head. So it's a very spiritual place. It can be a very spooky place, but also a very beautiful place. Place to sit and think and get ideas for books.
Mhm. Oh, I love that. Thank you for that. Yeah, so much of what you're saying really does accord with my own experience being there. I've only been there 11 times, not 30 like you, but I aspire
I'm 33
to have,
now.
to have your kind of relationship with Iceland in that way. But I've just got to say, yeah, that really resonates so many times that it feels like you can perceive a different kind of life force. And at least in my own experience, kind of what you're saying about the world, the earth remaking itself. The fact that, you see rock form, you understand rock life cycle in a different way by watching a volcanic eruption, for example. That really does make everything feel alive. And for me, I really understand the cultural language that is folk and elves, and seeing life everywhere, because you really are able to experience it in that powerful kind of way. So it's just, yeah, it's as you're speaking, I feel myself just like kind of feeling my heart expand with wonderment as I'm situating myself back in my own experiences as well. And I'm thrilled that your book is out into the world, and I hope so many more people will get to open their eyes and hearts to this kind of wonderment.
We should be able to feel that same wonderment in America too. Whether we're on the West Coast in Berkeley, or whether we're in New York City, or whether we're in Vermont where I live, the problem that I have is that there is so much richness and so much diversity and so many different creatures in Vermont that I've stopped seeing them. And when I go to Iceland, it's sparer, it's bare. You can count the number of flowers, you can, count the number of trees. You probably can't count the number of birds, but you can count the number of bird species. And you can easily count the number of native mammals because there's only one, the Arctic fox. But I think it took that experience, for me in Iceland, where everything is so much more elemental, to start saying, oh, well, the same is true in the woods in Vermont. The same is true in the parks in New York City. The same is true in the Bay Area. We just have to start looking and paying attention, and the wonder is there.